consumers are telling you that they like these like mainstay titles that have been around forever. The studios that are putting them out, it's like Sony, Nintendo, um, or Take Two and Rockstar, Epic Games. So if a game isn't coming out of one of these studios and it's not related to one of these titles, like from a monetization perspective or from a TAM perspective, which is what gaming folks are often talking about in the crypto space, like you don't have that TAM. That's not your TAM. It's Red Dead's TAM. It's Grand Theft Auto's TAM. It's Take Two's TAM.
Nothing said on 0x Research is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Boccaccio, Ryan, and our guests may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. Today I'm joined by Ryan, Connor, and Danny from Blockworks Research to talk about all that is happening in and across crypto. What's up, guys? Welcome back. How you doing?
Morning.
Bullish.
Very good. Not as big of a week as last week. Before we get started on talking about Sui, I wanted to say that they've had some issues with infrastructure partners selling. So if you are listening to this podcast and you're going to be interested in Sui, I would highly recommend looking into that and like when unlocks are happening, just in case, so nobody comes back in next week and says, "Oh, Baco told me about Sui," and then they dumped it on my head. But more relevantly, I've been we talked about it. We said, "Oh, what's even happening on Sui?" Deepbook recently launched. I don't know how familiar you guys are with it. Me and Danny had the chance to talk to Adini, who's the co-founder of Sui, the other day, and this is something that he talked about a lot as well. It's a club for the entire ecosystem, so similar to what Serum was on Solana, and basically order books and dexes on, so we can connect to it. It's pretty cool. On Aptos, they have something similar called Econia. It's up 7x over the past 2 weeks. It has 30 million TVL, which doesn't really matter that much, but more, I think, like, here, let me pull up some numbers over here. This kind of was a bit, I found this interesting. So it's still not up. There we go. Okay, now we can see it. Very good. So it is currently at 200 mil market cap, 800 mil FTV, did 166 million volume over the past month. Orca did 7.1 bill. Trader Joe did 1.7 bill. Camelot did 2 bill. So it's doing much less volume than all of these. So guess my question here is, like, it obviously has some form of valuation premium. Do you think this is coming from it being the official Sui-based order book for liquidity, or do you think it's coming from people pricing in Sui growth, TVL volumes, etc., will improve over the past few months, and that's what people are betting on and saying, look, everyone's going to plug into Deepbook, so we don't have to worry about the pricing right now. Volume's going to come. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's I have a few thoughts. One, I don't know how sophisticated the thinking is in regards to the trading of this token yet. They had a fairly large airdrop, right? It would be great if we had some data on, net buying and selling of perhaps, what those airdrops looked like as a relative amount of the circulating supply today. I think that would maybe tell a little bit deeper of a story. Perhaps participants who have earned that are, using it as a proxy for the Sui ecosystem, right? And so if they're, expecting, Sui has been doing really well. Obviously, for someone who's a participant in the ecosystem today, like the upside on the Sui token at $5+ billion is far different than something at 200 million market cap today. So maybe they're just using this as like a beta to Sui, kind of like I think you mentioned. And maybe they got the airdrop, so it was zero cost basis for them, and they can sell a little bit, or they can just hold whatever they've got or add to that, and play it from here. I do think you're right though, like the valuations today maybe don't make sense, but maybe just based on the recent traction, people are pricing in a little bit more growth. But even still, it does look relatively like overpriced when you look out across these comps. It seems quite a bit high, but maybe we're just in for a period of consolidation here going forward.
I was just gonna say, I think a part of it also comes from the fact that there isn't really much to buy on Sui apart from, and Danny, you kind of mentioned this as well, so I'm just repeating your point, but there isn't that much to buy on Sui apart from Sui, as well as some meme coins. So that's the one thing that I should have brought up when I first mentioned it as well.
Yeah, I think that the problem also, like everyone's looking for like high beta exposure to get to this ecosystem that seems to be kind of separating itself from, like when you look in the blockchain landscape, there's like 5 chains that are doing stuff and then the rest are not doing stuff relative. And then like Sui seems to be maybe separating itself from the pack. So people want that high beta exposure. I think that the problem is that these DEX tokens historically really disappoint. They don't have like a very like sustainable like value capture moat. Like unlike a perps DEX where you have to lock in capital and it can't move so quickly. It's just like really competitive at the DEX level, especially at this early speculative stage. So no sure things. I mean, I look at the names that you have here in front of us: Orca, Trader Joe, Camelot, like hyper competitive market. So not clear to me. The other was it Aftermath on Sui? Like I think that that's interesting. I'm increasingly interested in like cross selling opportunities in DeFi because it just makes sense at the end of the day. Like you look at how do banks make money? They cross sell. I'm not saying it's a perfect comp, but like you want to do everything in like one UI. So having a lot of services or a lot of complementary services and being able to cross sell them is like I think super important. The model really hasn't worked in a meaningful way in DeFi, I think, given this airdrop dynamic. So, but I do expect it to work eventually. And Aftermath is one name in that space that maybe since this ecosystem is kind of starting from the ground up, they have the ability to pull that off. But we'll see. It's way too early to tell. Sui could be a zero. I have no clue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other factor I'll add is that like for airdrop tokens, it's still very early. I mean, we're a week into this token, I think. Obviously, I think the market regime has a lot to do with performance of brand new tokens like this. If you enter into up only mode, like in the beginning of this year, for example, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent on a short. So that is something to consider. But I think even if you look at like Jupe from Solana, I mean, it had a period of quite insanity early in this year, going up to like nearly $2 a coin. I mean, that was like a 20 billion FDV at that point in time, nearly. The metrics today for Jupe look quite a bit better, but yeah, I mean, I think just the market environment it's becoming a little bit hotter again. It's a brand new token, 1 week. It's had no time to like really distribute off of this airdrop supply potential. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I think the longer term picture here is really going to depend on continued ecosystem growth for Sui, and if it really is like the kind of liquidity hub for all apps going forward, then the economics could start to make sense if it continues to grow as a larger ecosystem.
Yeah. Ryan, I like that you touched up on Aftermath because that's something that I wanted to talk about, but you kind of gave it all away by talking that you like cross-selling. So they're trying to be a one-stop shop. LST Swaps, aggregator of aggregators. I think like exactly what Jupiter was doing. For what it's worth, they've published a few pieces on MEV on Sui, so I assume that they're doing some stuff on that side as well. Maybe something to do with the LST, going like the Jito model potentially. No way to get exposure as it is with all good projects, except for using it. And they launched these egg NFTs 3-4 months ago. I don't know if you guys have ever seen them, but up to like 80 Sui a piece. I don't think they're gonna do anything with them. Just wanted to bring that up. That's the only thing that they've launched. Hey guys, for today's snippet, I am once again joined by Miguel to talk about AI and privacy. Thanks for joining us, Miguel.
Thank you, Boccaccio. Great to be here.
So why is privacy important, especially in the context of decentralized AI?
Yeah, in the context of decentralized AI, it is important because it enables three important things. It enables to enrich the data sets with private information that not even the largest players in AI have access to right now. So most of the LLMs have been trained with primarily public data, but there's a lot of potential in private data that sits in companies. Like most of the data on the planet sits in encrypted form and is owned by someone. And I'm not only talking about personal data, but imagine, like, I don't know, data that players in a vertical like agriculture may have that is really sensitive or is the asset of one company and they keep it to themselves. So unlocking value of this data, because you're making it private, you're not revealing it to the nodes training the model, it's something very valuable. Then the model weights themselves are also subject to, they can be protected with privacy. And that is, again, very important and interesting, because now if I specialize on training models, I don't have to give you the weights if you're going to run inference on my model. So again, something very interesting. And finally, the third and probably most important point is the fact that you're protecting user inputs and prompts, because the company running inference on your prompts are not going to see them. Your prompts will remain private. So those three are kind of main reasons why privacy is important in decentralized AI. And I also believe that it's not just a feature. It can potentially create a healthier ecosystem, because right now everything is centralized. It's like an oligopoly. It's like a monopoly of a few really powerful companies. If I have a startup and I want to step into that market, I would have to cover the whole chain of value, from data gathering to training to inference. Those are very different problems, very expensive, and I would have to invest millions of dollars to make that happen. That's why the monopoly exists. But if you're able to apply or apply privacy to those key elements, like data sets, model weights, and user inputs, then you're actually decoupling them. And so now you can think about companies just specializing on one element, like this agriculture company I was talking about. So maybe that's all I do. I create this interesting data set about agriculture data, and I provide it in a privacy preserving way to other companies doing training. Or I specialize in training, or I specialize in running very efficient inference. So this specialization leads to diversification, which leads to better tech and more innovation. So I think privacy in the context of decentralized AI is actually transformational, because it can change the whole industry and make it healthier.
That makes sense. And one thing you brought up was these private and, I guess, like secret data sets. The agricultural company is the example that you gave. How, obviously, like ballpark, how much of data are we missing out on right now because it's encrypted and private property that we can't access?
I cannot give you like a percentage, but the vast majority of data on the planet sits in encrypted form and is owned by companies, because, as you know, there's many companies that make their business model revolve around that very specific asset, data. So companies have been gathering data across the last decades, and they're sitting on those honeypots, so to speak. So there's a lot of untapped value. There's a lot of information that they don't want to make public because it's core of their business, or they can not make it public because it would violate some regulations that are applicable to their vertical, like, for example, data protection violations or bank secrecy regulations. There's tons of examples like that. So I think in essence, we're sitting on top of like the bottom of the iceberg, and what we're seeing now, what we've trained our LLM models on, is actually the tip of it.
Yeah. And how does Nillion enable uniquely privacy in AI?
It's throughout this concept of the orchestration layer. The idea here is that there's not going to be a single privacy enhancing technology that actually solves for every different problem. For example, if you want verifiability, then you'll probably go for ZK-ML, right? You will want to run zero knowledge proofs, which enable you to prove statements on your data or on processes applied to your data. In this case, you want to be proving that you run a certain model on your inputs and not a different model. So you make verifiable proof that anyone can check and make sure that actually you did run that model and not something else. But in this case, ZKP is not providing privacy to the equation, because you actually have to have access to the model weights and to the inputs. That's typically a combination that you don't find. So then you have another types of technology, which is TEs or MPC, which both solve for the same functional problem, which is how can you then compute, for example, run inference on a model without, without sharing either the weights or the inputs or the prompts. Both, as I said, are functionally equivalent, trusted execution environments. It's a hardware solution to that problem. And then you have like software solutions, which are typically regarded as MPC or multi-party computation. Both are functionally equivalent, but they're not the same in terms of security assumptions. So TEs require more trust in the parties running the hardware because, as you know, there's been like vulnerabilities found in the past, and there's attacks like side chain attacks where you can gain some information. That's fine for some use cases. Again, I'm not saying that TEs are not useful, but in other cases where you want a higher security level, you may want to be using MPC. And even inside of MPC, there's different takes on that. You can build MPC using something called linear secret sharing, which has very high degree of security because it's typically is information theoretic security, which is the best type of security you get in cryptography. But you can also build MPC using FHE, fully homomorphic encryption, which is very interesting as well because it doesn't require any pre-processing and it has some special characteristics that makes it appealing. And then you can also build it from something called garbled circuits, which is a third main way of building MPC. And again, between among these three, there is no clear winner. They have different performance characteristics. Like, for example, performance is measured in terms of the number of rounds that your protocol requires, the bandwidth that it requires, and the compute or CPU or GPU that it requires. LSSS, the worst thing about it is that it requires a large number of rounds. Garbled circuits, it requires a lot of bandwidth. And FHE, the worst thing is that it requires a lot of computation. So it really depends on your use case. Are you going to be compute constrained, or are you going to be bandwidth constrained, or are you going to be constrained in terms of communication because you have many nodes sitting geographically apart? Therefore, the solution is not clear. Who's the winner? There's no winner. So we're rather building this ecosystem where you can combine the different PETs, the different privacy-enhancing technologies, and build a tailor-made solution for your specific problem that hits the sweet spot between performance and security. And to do that, you need this orchestration layer, which is a layer that is able to connect or interlink the different technologies.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. Last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of Sui was that they have had more of a. I think like oftentimes we talk about Sui versus Aptos, and one thing that's become clearer and clearer to me is that Sui very clearly, or I guess like very explicitly, has said we want to focus on gaming and consumers, versus Aptos is very like much focused on real world assets. I don't know which one is better. I assume, like if it was me, I would want to go for institutions. I think they're easier to deal with and to please, as opposed to like pleasing users and retail. But yeah, Sui, they have that gaming device. I don't know how useful that's going to be, but apart from that, they're very explicitly trying to go for gaming through ZK login, which is allows you to third-party logging with like Web2 apps, and you have social recovery. It's actually pretty cool. I had the chance to talk to Danny, and he was very firm on the fact that low-value transactions matter, so payments matter. I don't know if I agree with that, but I guess you want that for what he wants, which is like a large consumer / gaming base. It makes sense. On the other side, like I said, Aptos is very much RWA focused. Head on the finance launch on Aptos. Franklin Templeton added their money market fund on Aptos, and then also I think Nomura and WebN released something to onboard Brevin Howard. Hamilton Lane's Senior Credit Opportunities Fund, and BlackRock's money market fund on Aptos. So two very clearly like different, I think, approaches at this point. Which one will win? Danny, what's the right answer?
I think there are points to be made on both sides here. If you want to leave that slide up, the on the gaming side and even on the low value transaction side, I see positives and negatives on this one particular. Like if I think of very successful, mobile gaming applications, for example, think of your Clash of Clans, etc. While the cheap in-app transactions, spend $1 to get some gems to interact with the game, while that could be meaningful on like a high scale basis, right? If you can convince millions of users to do that, that's millions in revenue. The models that these games, like the way that these games end up making money is never through that model. It's always a small subset of whales that push a ton of volume themselves. We see this on large chains today. If you look at Solana, if you look at on-chain volumes, there's lots of accounts trading very, very little in volume, but then there are a few large wallets doing significant multiples greater volume, and they're driving a large percentage of the overall total volume picture. That being said, I think you need both, is what I want to say here, in that, for Clash of Clans to become really successful, and you get these large whales that want to invest their money and their time into the game. I think it's to an extent necessitated by how popular and how pervasive the game becomes. If you don't have millions of people playing it, you're not going to get this large class of whales that want to come in and dump all their money into the game. So to an extent, it's meaningful, but it may not be directly meaningful in your actual revenue picture. I think that's really the point to take away from it. On the on the Aptos RWA side of things, I just hate the term real world assets. I think it's really stupid. If these are meaningful products, let's just call them what they are. If we're bringing T-bills on chain, if we're giving people access to fixed income markets, if we're giving access to bond yields, etc. I think there's probably a more meaningful and constructive way to talk about these things, other than saying our real world assets, the future of on-chain economies, because it just really abstracts away the real discussion, in my opinion.
I guess I meant Aptos is very clearly focused on more institutional money coming on their chain, and I agree that it's probably a mix of the two. For what it's worth, I don't think that the gaming focus will work out for Sui. Not because I don't think gaming is important, but more so because I think every chain is going for gaming. Like the TAM is big, and it's tangentially related to crypto and very a digital user base that everybody's like, oh, we need to get the gamers on. Sui said they're doing it for Playtron, which is an OS, so they want to onboard using their OS and their hardware device. I don't know how that's going to work when we have presumably Avalanche throwing money at some of these gaming studios, Arbitrum throwing money at gaming studios through GCP, Solana, which is obviously a very hot name that I imagine gaming studios who want low transaction and a user base that's very active who are constantly on the blockchain. They want to go to Solana, which is obviously dominating narratives and attention. So I don't know, that's the only reason that I would say the gaming focus might not work out for Sui. On the other hand, I think you probably want to go for it. It's the final, it's the white whale. I think you definitely want to go for it. It's as far as low value transactions go, gaming is the highest low value transaction, because it also goes into NFTs, and maybe they'll go use some DeFi protocols. I doubt it, but what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that There are pros to the gaming, to going after the gaming market, which is just like the adjacency of that user base to crypto. We've talked about that a lot. I think that there are a lot of cons with specifically targeting the gaming market that are pretty underappreciated. Um, First, just in the case of Sui specifically, um, like mobile gaming is like the dominant form factor or platform today. It's actually the only like platform or form factor where that's experienced growth since like 2015, 2016. I'm just eyeballing a chart from Matthew Ball here. Um, Consoles are sideways to down, right? Like it's actually like additional friction to try to introduce a mobile console to someone today. It's quite odd. Like I understand Switch was successful, but like the market there seems like pretty limited, um, relative to gaming, which you already have like a huge installed base of the mobile device, right? So you should go for the mobile device. I think that that's pretty obvious. It's the lowest hanging fruit. And it's also the highest monetizing and highest growing today. So that seems, I don't know, the focus on like the standalone console seems like an error. I think the point on gaming transactions being low value transactions is correct. I think simple payments, um, look, they don't create MEV and they don't create priority fees. So you're left with a super minimal base fee. And like you could kind of like imagine a world, like I'm just saying that this is a risk to base layer value accrual for payments. You can imagine a world where payments are totally somewhere else than the L1, like simple payments, because the L1 is increasingly being used by sophisticated actors to trade assets against one another. And they're going to box out your simple, $5 payment for, a hot dog at the ball game to your friend. So, prioritization there, like I understand that there are like potential knock-on effects there, but as far as like near-term revenue for a base layer, the prioritization there I think is suboptimal. Um, the other, I think, underappreciated thing about gaming, um, is that consumers are increasingly telling you. No, look, I'm not in the weeds as much as you guys on gaming. There's obviously like niche games are popular. They last for some time. But as far as like we're constantly talking about the TAM of gaming, right? It's like $200 billion plus. I would argue that a lot of that TAM is not accessible to crypto. Um, if because gamers are telling you um, that they favor um, large studios and like call them like Lindy titles. So I guess another way to say it is that concentration in gaming is increasing in um, from both a title perspective and from a studio perspective. So when you look at the shooter category, the top three shooter games generate 70% of the genre's revenue, and 94% of that genre's revenue is generated by games that are older than 2 years old. So incumbents, right? Um, from a game sales perspective, and this is data from Matthew Ball, um, from 2009 to 2002, the best-selling games in the United States came basically from only three categories or three varieties, which was Call of Duty. They won the top spot 12 times. Grand Theft Auto's or Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto won it once in that 15-year period, and then Rockstar's Red Dead Redemption won one time in a 15-year period, but appeared on like this top 10 list like six times. And even when you add like the free to play games to this category, Fortnite is just like the only one, and it's like been in there 5 of the last 10 years. So like consumers are telling you that they like these like mainstay titles that have been around forever. The studios that are putting them out, it's like Sony, Nintendo, or Take Two and Rockstar, Epic Games. So if a game isn't coming out of one of these studios and it's not related to one of these titles, like from a monetization perspective or from a TAM perspective, which is what gaming folks are often talking about in the crypto space, like you don't have that TAM. That's not your TAM. It's Red Dead's TAM. It's Grand Theft Auto's TAM. It's Take Two's TAM. So um, I think those are underappreciated by risks from the gaming folks. And when you see these like mega funds on Arbitrum targeting the gaming sector, or when you see Sui kind of like going all in, like I don't know, I question that strategy.
I think I have. I generally like. I'm not even gonna say I agree with you because you're just talking pure statistics. So like, even if I disagree with the statistics, it doesn't work because they're numbers. But I'm gonna say I wrote about this. I think for the first gaming report that we did at Blockworks, and it's I don't really see crypto games. That's why like I don't really see them competing with these AAA games. Specifically, I don't see the point of having Web 2.5 games is what like I referred to them back then. Now I try and call them hybrid on-chain games. Um, I think it makes way more sense for crypto to go for the fully on-chain gaming crowd, where it's like very much you're appealing to a very niche crowd. I don't know if you guys have ever played Paradox games like Paradox Interactive, like Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings, Victoria Free, Victoria 2. These types of games that have a smaller, like, how would I define it? For example, what's the Wukong game? That game, you get 70 hours out of it, and it goes very, very viral, and a lot of people play that game. And they make a lot of money off those sales. With Paradox Interactive games, let's say like Europe of Universalis 4, you play that game 5,000 hours, 6,000 hours. Like you play it was launched in 2013 and people still play it today. Not that many people play it because it's a very niche game that appeals to a small subset that is very into the mods of the game, like getting into the really nitty gritty bits of the game. And I think crypto appeals to that side. I think like the current subset of crypto users that probably like in the Venn diagram with Paradox Interactive players, I think it's probably quite large. And I think that could be a way for crypto gaming to work out, for them to actually find some form of PMF. I do agree that it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like even with off the grid, when did Apex come out? Danny, do you know? I can't remember. But it's like relatively new and it's newer than well, it's definitely newer than like Call of Duty. And it's newer than Fortnite as well.
2019.
Yeah. So that's like, and it's top 3 right now. Like it beat PUBG. So there are incumbents that come in and take these spots, but it makes sense to be doubtful that a crypto game would be able to do that. But like I said, I think it makes more sense to do niche games that like appeal to um, the really intense people, because I feel like crypto has a lot of that, as opposed to like large demographic games like FIFA, Madden, Call of Duty, etc.
Right. Yeah. My point was specifically on the estimate of TAM, and maybe I wasn't clear on that. Like the TAM is when you adjust for that, what you're talking about, like these more niche opportunities. If a fund's trying to sell you an allocation or LP interest, and they're telling you our TAM is 200 billion, it's not. It's you have to discount that by 99% or something. Like I think I think you're right. I think that you see it today in the market. Like I know that this is like a not everyone agrees with this framing, but like I do think that Pump Fun is a game. Like Fantasy Top is obviously a game. I think Friend Tech was a game. I think we're constantly playing games with these coins, right? So, and it's very like retail oriented. So I think gaming has probably been more successful than people think in crypto. If you want to expand your definition there, um, so then when I think of what's the opportunity in market cap terms for a game, I look at Take Two, the studio, $27 billion valuation, 5.4 billion in top line revenues over the last 12 months. That seems pretty unlikely, but if you're going to like take the studio route to like gaming riches in crypto, like it's a lot of like small games like Fantasy Top, right? You're constantly pushing out different mobile games at a high cadence. I think that that's how you compete there, very, very broadly from a high level. And then on like what is each game token worth on a market cap basis? Like, I don't know, if you got a token, you wrote it from 50 million to a billion, like, I don't know, it's hard to think it's going to go much higher given this like take two kind of comp. Um, and not an expert. I don't know. Are there any individual games? I don't think we can count Roblox, but are there any individual games that have like TradFi market caps so we can look at for comps?
As far as those individual games go, like some of the largest and best examples are going to be owned by the biggest publishers and studios today. So they're playing into, you know what I mean? Like if you're going to pick out World of Warcraft, we're talking about Blizzard. If you're going to talk about Call of Duty, you're talking about Blizzard, Activision Blizzard. You pick a lot of these top titles that might, achieve some massive valuation on their own, and it's because they're already owned by the largest studio that was able to spend maybe the tens or hundreds of millions to kind of put that together in the first place and build it and market it. Or the game has existed for a decade. They've been building and marketing it for a decade. It has that established user base. I think both of you are correct. I think that the mobile focus is certainly an interesting like avenue from the monetization aspect, as well as just like we're seeing with Telegram, like with these mini apps, that there is some kind of pipeline from like small in-game monetization and transactions to like simple on-chain actions or activities, quick like tap to do a transaction to get like a boost for an hour. Like there's some models here that can be explored, and we're seeing some like relative like excitement and usage of them at least, to get things going. On the other side of things, I think you're right, Ryan. Like the TAM is not like, if we look at off the grid and then we compare it to shooters, like that is a very, very contested category. If you're competing with Call of Duty and you're competing with Apex Legends and like all of these top shooters today, these are from the biggest studios in the world. They're spending hundreds of millions to launch these new games. I mean, Call of Duty drops a new game basically every year. They spend hundreds of millions to build and market it, and they get their money back, but that's who you're competing against if you're going to drop, a shooter into their category. And so you better be ready to spend and market and kind of iterate on the development there. And it has to be top notch, right? Like if you're going to launch a 2021 style crypto game in an attempt to compete, like you are dead in the water. If your graphics and like the gameplay experience are awful. I think where another opportunity lies that hasn't been mentioned is like the indie game market. Just a quick stat here. Apparently, according to Global Indie Games Market Report, indie games have generated nearly $4 billion in gross revenue on Steam this year, which is 48% of all full game revenue on the platform this year. So nearly half of all full game revenue, which is game sales, not in-game microtransactions or like in-game shop transactions, but just game sales on Steam. Half essentially coming from indie games this year. I think there's an opportunity there, and I think the problem or the issue that it sort of alludes to is that there might be value in like a game token or a particular game that happens to build some traction. It's interesting. It's like a new take on something, but then the value accrues to like that particular game. It's not going to accrue to the blockchain, right? We've looked at the economics of like how much transactions cost and what that feeds back to like a Sui or a Solana or an Avalanche, and it's not meaningful. So even with millions of transactions like that revenue is not going to be very meaningful. But if you have a game that can, an indie game that can pop up and pull in 50 million in revenue, obviously that game is meaningful.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the shooter category and these like I don't know, for lack of a better term, metaverses, or just like these like these, I don't know, you're playing in a world, right, with like other people. They actually like have network effects, which is pretty overused term in crypto. But they actually have network effects. Like the more people are using the thing, the more useful it becomes. And there's like this structural technology advantage too, where like I think when Fortnite started, like you could have max 6 people playing at a time. Now it's hundreds. As like, these like bandwidth constraints like become a thing of the past. Well, like you still need to run like pretty complex infra in a data center. There's a reason that these games are capped at like 150 or so. Um, that's a problem for crypto gaming. right? Like we want to do things fully on chain, but hey, guess what? You need some AWS scale infra to really make this thing work uh, in line with how competitors scale these things up. Um, so if there's network effects, there's that they have to contend with, and there are meaningful technology constraints, I think.
Yeah, crypto gaming infra is still very, very nascent. I don't think we've had really anything that's been particularly impressive to the point that we can run any of these games. I think it's definitely getting better though, especially the fully on-chain stuff, improving ever so slowly, but ever so slightly. What's
One more point here. I do think there's some interesting like kind of continued development there. Magic Block is maybe a good example on
Yeah.
Solana. But as far as like maybe the question for crypto gaming going forward is if the tech really like enables something more interesting for games and for gamers, if off the grids marketplace is actually really interesting to gamers, owning their assets and whatnot. The difficult problem is that then, Blizzard, Activision, Call of Duty, they can drop their next iteration with a gaming marketplace. And, if you were all on off the grid, maybe Call of Duty cannibalizes that whole opportunity anyway because they already have all of the gaming market share. It's hard to say how that necessarily plays out.
I feel like Activision wouldn't be able to compete on that front. It's just like the same reason why off the grid has to take has to return whatever revenue it has through it has to take these it has to basically make less money than it could if it was an Activision, just because it wants to compete with Call of Duty or whatever, like Apex, Fortnite. But Activision doesn't have to do that. Call of Duty doesn't have to do that. Would just rather keep all of the money. So I don't see how off the grid taking, let's say, 3% market share out of the entire um, battle royale genre would make Activision say, "Oh, hey guys, we need to make all of our assets tradable." I just don't see it. I feel like all of these typically as far as I understand, developers like taking risks, or they want to take some form of risk, but executives don't like to take risks, which makes sense because they have to provide shareholder value. They have to go back to the shareholders and say, "Hey guys, and I don't know if they're going to be able to say, "Hey guys, we lost 3% market share to off the grid, so we had to how we had a system where every year we would just redo all of the points and the money that we have in the game so that we made an extra God knows how much money the moment that a new game launched. We're actually going to get rid of that because somebody took 3% of our market share." I don't, you know what I mean? I don't see if they would ever be able to justify that. I don't see it. I imagine they would always be really, really slow. So I definitely think there's an opportunity, but like you guys said, I don't think it's a $200 billion opportunity.
I think that's fair, but I do think there's a tipping point as well, right? Like 3% might not be it, but if one of these games captures, if you get a new Fortnite, but it's a blockchain game, like that will cause developers to act. And I think the thought process here is, their margins are X today, and they make a ton of money and revenue, and so for them to be like, well, we can compete with them if we just give away like X minus Y, and then we're still a behemoth, we're still making a ton of money, we just have to give away Y, and we can recapture this market share back from this new incumbent. I think is the thought process.
That's fair. All right, let's move on. Ryan, last thing is I know something that you want to talk about, which is first mover advantage in crypto. Do you want to run over it, or do you want me to give a small background and then you can give a Ryan take?
Yeah, please go for it, and I'll give a Ryan take.
So this is Hasib's tweet. Here, let me put it up. So, and it's basically him saying crypto doesn't really have a first mover advantage. There's no real moats. Uniswap was not the first AMM. Coinbase and Binance weren't the first exchanges. Tether wasn't the first stablecoin. Yada yada yada. And I agree with this. I don't really see. I think I know one thing is definitely Hyperliquid is the one. I think oftentimes the first mover gets lazy because they assume that this 3-year-old technology is Now they have PMF and they're going to be able to do really good. I think Hyperliquid is the clearest example that has been for me. Like DYDX got lazy, Hyperliquid swooped in into a sector that has historically been very mercenary. Gave out a good incentive program, a good points program, and just took all of their volume, or at least a lot of their volume.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we all agree here. It's really hard to have first mover advantage in a market like crypto. Like thinking in Web 2, there seems to be some tendency for like first mover advantage to work out, like Netflix, eBay, Amazon, and e-commerce. Like these guys had first mover advantage. And in short, I think it's because like there are moats. There are like very observable, strong moats in a lot of like either physical or Web 2 businesses. Um, and when you have a moat plus network effects, like they just compound and it's really hard to compete. I think that it's pretty underappreciated that there are very, very few moats in crypto and that a lot of things can very easily get competed away. Um, some obvious moats to me, and there are very few, but given the open source nature and um, the the high speed nature of the capital in the space, like yeah, crypto shouldn't have moats. But last mover advantage is a real thing in crypto. Seeing what an incumbent did, watching them get comfortable, as you said, Bach, and then just doing something a little bit better, something like actually historically is like very, very obvious, saving, partners costs or having a more favorable fee structure is like, or, slightly better incentive structure is like a really good source of incremental edge in a space with a few modes. So like Pith over Chainlink, right? Like Chainlink made the very obvious mistake of focusing on security over speed, and having meaningful frictions for integration, high fees, and then pushing prices to its the apps that used it rather than letting those apps pull those prices when they need it. Pith saw that and it's like, hey, this is very obvious. Like, let's go to market with this kind of new model. And then by some measures, like Pith is massively outperforming in terms of market share. Like you said, Bog Hyperliquid over DYDX, becoming more general purpose. Solana over Ethereum is a great one, where the incumbent just got way too comfortable and the roadmap was way too long, and it offered Solana in with a higher execution speed, both like from a product perspective and from on-chain perspective. Jito over Marinade is another one. I remember when Marinade was 100% in the market. And then Jito offered a very, like, in hindsight, obvious thing, which is just like, okay, we'll do some MEV. And then it's just like a better product. I don't know, durable moats that I can identify. Um, and maybe there are more, but like off-chain partnerships, I think this one's really underappreciated. It is and it isn't underappreciated. People notice like, yeah, Telegram has, an off-chain relationship, or sorry, Ton has an off-chain relationship in Telegram. Coinbase has an off-chain relationship in Coinbase, or sorry, Base has an off-chain relationship in Coinbase. I think strong community, though I've discounted this one for a long time, is another potential moat in this space, where as you get bigger, as people get more enthusiastic, like you get this like community locked in. And then another underappreciated one, which I think will get increasing attention over the next 12 months, is just physical hardware. Helium has a massive advantage over competitors that it already has a ton of hardware out in the world providing services. Hive Mapper's the same. Like they have a lot of their cars that use Hive Mapper have two dash cams in them. Like you can't compete with Hive Mapper by making people put two more dash cams in that card. It's incrementally more challenging. So these kind of like durable moats, I think you need them to have a first mover advantage if it exists at all.
I think I agree with all of them except for off-chain partnerships. except for the one that you mentioned, Telegram ton makes sense. I just think like the moment that you said that, I was like, oh, Polygon's off-chain partnerships have just been like not beneficial at all, just fake. But I don't think that's what you meant anyway, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, it's obviously by case basis. I think a distribution partnership where you have like the Telegram instance where like there is a button for international Telegram users and it says wallet and it's a
Yeah.
Tom wallet. Like that's pretty powerful. Same thing with the Coinbase base thing. Maybe there's another layer to this, which is like native partnerships versus non-native partnerships. Like Starbucks didn't reach out to Polygon, or at least I mean I don't know, but I highly doubt Starbucks reached out to Polygon. It's probably the other way around. So like the quality of the partnership obviously matters and the incentives.
Yeah, I think I largely agree, but I also think that like maybe just to add on the first mover point is that I think the first mover advantage is like a little bit maybe overstated in many cases as well. I just think you can think back to so many examples even in Web 2 of like tech companies where something is attempted in 1991, it massively fails, and then 10, 15, 20 years later, the tech or the larger industry as a whole, like and consumers are more willing or interested, or that advancement makes more sense. The idea is basically retried with new branding and is a massive success. Timing is key, I guess is what I want to say. So, you could have tried to launch, Pump Fun in 2014, but maybe it would not have worked at that time just due to the industry's like large focus on maybe proof of work related blockchains at the time. But today we're in a much different market layout than we were at that time. I think, just timing of like innovations and your go to market and what the product is and how it serves consumers is another big factor that I think kind of gets overlooked when we just talk about like first mover advantage in a vacuum.
Are you levered long right now as the market's dumping? Is that what's going on?
No, I'm not levered.
You put on a levered long position when you saw the coins going up. You bought in late, and now they're dumping on you this morning, and now you're getting liquidated.
He bought AI coins too late, and now he's
I
Jesus.
legit did buy AI coins too late. I got fucking dumped on, like heavy. Holy shit! I didn't even know we were having a pullback. Wow.
Me and Danny are sitting pretty in spot memes.
yeah. You know what they say? Just
We're having a
zoom
great
out.
morning.
Zoom out. The entire space is 1,000xing.
That's what I'm saying. Here, let me actually give our viewers never see this, but I think it would be fun if they did. Guys, this is zoom out whole space 1000x. This is not financial advice, by the way. All right. Yeah, anything you guys are dying to tell people before we head off, before we wrap it up?
That's all she wrote.
Thank you so much for listening to the pod. Danny, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on.